The silence that fell over the boardroom after Mr. Bennett's shaky presentation was lethal. He was seconds away from losing the biggest deal of his career, sweat gluing his shirt to his back, completely unaware the crucial number on slide 7 was wrong, a decimal point misplaced. I saw it instantly. Before anyone could speak, before the clients could close their briefcases, I leaned in across the mahogany table. "Sir," I whispered, my voice barely audible but carrying the weight of a lifeline. "The acquisition cost on slide 7 is 7 billion, not 170 million. You missed the decimal." His relief wasn't visible to the room, but I felt it like an electric shock between us. He just stared. Elias Bennett, the formidable CEO of Weston Industries, and for a split second, he looked utterly defeated, saved by his daughter's quiet, invisible friend. "My name is Anya Petrova. I'm 31, a highly proficient financial analyst at a mid-tier firm, and essentially, I am the human equivalent of background noise. My life is structured around efficiency, not excitement. After the adrenaline crash from saving Elias Bennett's multi-billion-dollar deal, a deal I was only auditing remotely, brought in by his daughter Stella, as a last-minute favor, I returned to my own small office, overlooking the gray expanse of downtown Manhattan. The view was functional, just like my apartment, my wardrobe, and my Friday night plans. That evening, I was microwaving a pre-packed lentil soup, the kind that promises nutrition, but delivers only mild sadness. Stella, my best friend since college, was currently on a delayed flight to Milan. This meant the usual buffer between me and her father, my accidental employer-client, was gone. I usually interacted with Mr. Bennett only through emails, dry, formal exchanges about quarterly reports or market trends. He was the kind of man whose presence consumed a room. I was the kind of person who specialized in being unnoticed while getting the job done. It was safer that way. My routine was simple. I worked late, went home, read dense nonfiction, and woke up early. I didn't date. Not because I was opposed to it, but because the emotional effort required to bridge the gap between my internal landscape and someone else's expectations felt monumental. I had adapted to a quiet solitude, a comfortable anonymity that felt safe. I was the person people called when they needed meticulous detail, not when they needed company. I scrolled through social media while the microwave hummed its lonely tune, seeing photos of Stella, vibrant and laughing, already making the most of her impromptu European trip. I was genuinely happy for her, but a familiar ache, dull and consistent, settled in my chest. I sometimes wondered if I had somehow missed the memo on how to live loudly. The phone rang, jarring the quiet of my kitchen. It was an unknown number, a local prefix. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't know anyone who called after 7 o'clock, unless it was a telemarketer or an emergency. But something, maybe the lingering tension from the boardroom drama, made me swipe the screen. "Hello?" I asked, my voice flat, already anticipating a polite rejection of whatever I was about to be offered. The voice on the other end was deep, familiar, and instantly commanding. "Anya, it's Elias Bennett." My heart gave a sharp, unauthorized thump against my ribs. Elias Bennett, calling me, Anya Petrova, on my personal cell phone. My lentil soup timer dinged, sounding ridiculously trivial against the sudden weight of his tone. This was not about quarterly reports. I fumbled with the microwave door, nearly dropping the scorching plastic bowl. "Mr. Bennett, everything all right with the New Jersey team?" I asked, immediately resorting to professional detachment. It was the only armor I owned when facing someone like him. "The New Jersey team is fine, Anya, thanks to you," he said. His voice was tired, the deep resonance slightly muted. "I apologize for calling your personal line this late. Stella gave it to me, emphasizing that I was only to use it in dire emergencies, which, in hindsight, yesterday's presentation qualified as." I managed a weak smile, though he couldn't see it. "It was just a misplaced decimal, sir. Common mistake under pressure." I desperately wanted to hang up and eat my soup, to return to the predictability of my evening. This call felt too exposed. It was a 48-hour shift I pulled to get that pitch ready, and I still missed the most basic detail. He countered, a thread of self-deprecation I had never heard from the man who commanded boardrooms. I called because I'm about to do something unconventional, and I wanted to preface it by saying thank you. Properly. I frowned. Elias Bennett thanking anyone properly usually involved a large bonus check and an email CC'd to his entire leadership team. That's unnecessary, Mr. Bennett. Stella already transferred the payment for the overnight audit. I'm not talking about money, Anya. I'm talking about human interaction. There was a brief, almost imperceptible hesitation. My driver just called in sick. I have a stack of sensitive documents that need to be delivered to a secure location near JFK tonight. It's too late for a courier service I trust, and frankly, my head is still swimming with numbers. I need someone competent, someone I know won't look at the contents, someone who understands discretion. I processed the request. It was entirely transactional, a high-level errand, nothing more. But the sheer audacity of him asking me, the quiet analyst who rarely even attended meetings, to handle this critical late-night task was shocking. I understand, I said, already mentally calculating the fastest route to the Upper East Side. When and where should I meet you? Now, my penthouse. It's right around the corner from your building, isn't it? He stated, confirming he knew exactly where I lived. Stella must have mentioned it, a casual detail about their friend living nearby. I'll send the address. I'll make it worth your while, Anya. And for the record, this isn't a job. It's a desperate favor from a tired man. I sighed, looking at my cold soup. My quiet Friday night had evaporated. Give me 15 minutes, Mr. Bennett. I grabbed my keys, pulling on a blazer. I felt no excitement, only the weary resignation of being the reliable adult, the person who fixed problems. I was going to Elias Bennett's luxurious apartment, not as a guest, not as a date, but as an impromptu, highly qualified delivery service. It was the perfect encapsulation of my life, always functional, never favored. The lobby of the Bennett residence was everything my small apartment was not, vast, hushed, and gleaming with polished marble. The doorman recognized my name instantly. Apparently, I had been cleared through the security perimeter before I even crossed the street. Status had privileges I only experienced peripherally. The penthouse was on the 55th floor. The elevator ride was too long, giving me ample time to regret wearing my slightly stained blazer. I was preparing my professional face, calm, collected, ready to receive instructions and vanish. I was the ghost in the machine. Elias Bennett opened the door himself. He was not wearing a suit. That was the first shock. He was in dark jeans and a navy cashmere sweater, still impeccably tailored, but softer, less armor-like. Without the structured formality of the boardroom, he looked older, perhaps 50, and undeniably tired. The relentless energy that powered Weston Industries was noticeably dimmed. Anya, thank you for coming, he said, stepping aside. His voice was quieter here, away from the demanding echo of his office. I stepped into a space that felt less like a home and more like an art installation. Expansive windows framed the shimmering geometry of the city, but my focus remained on him. Elias Bennett always moved like he was calculating the next 3 steps, but now he seemed grounded, weighted by something internal. No problem, Mr. Bennett, I replied, maintaining the formal distance. I came right away. He managed a thin smile, running a hand over the back of his neck. Please, it's Elias, especially now. You're in my kitchen. The kitchen was enormous and sterilely clean. On the central island, there was a sleek black briefcase, locked. It looked important, dangerous even. The documents are here, he continued, gesturing toward the briefcase. They need to be signed by Mr. Kessel at the airport hangar. He's taking the red-eye to London. It's time-sensitive. I nodded, already reaching for the case. I noticed a small detail, a coffee mug on the counter, half empty. It wasn't the pristine porcelain of an executive suite. It was a simple, chipped ceramic mug, the kind that held sentimental value. It didn't fit the narrative of his polished life. I have the car waiting downstairs. It's a discreet sedan. The driver knows where to go. You just need to hand over the case and return it here when it's signed. He paused, his eyes settling on mine. They were a clear, startling shade of gray, and for the first time, they held genuine fatigue, not authority. "You look exhausted, Elias," I said, the observation slipping out before my professional filter could catch it. It was too familiar, too honest. He didn't flinch, didn't chastise me for the informality. He simply leaned against the counter, a heavy sigh escaping him. "I haven't slept more than 3 hours in the last week, Anya. I feel like I'm running on borrowed time." He looked at me, the powerful CEO stripped down to a man who just needed a moment of peace. And I realized the core of the issue wasn't the logistics of the briefcase. It was the need for reliable presence. He couldn't trust his drivers or assistants with this, but he trusted me. The weight of his gaze was unfamiliar. When Elias Bennett looked at people in the office, it was to assess, command, or dismiss. But this look was different. It was appraising, perhaps, but also searching. It lingered for a breath too long, turning the vast, expensive kitchen into a small, stifling space. I focused intensely on the black briefcase, trying to regain my footing. "I'll get going then, Elias. It will take me about 45 minutes to get to JFK, traffic permitting." "Wait," he said, pushing himself off the counter. He walked toward me, his pace slow, measured. He wasn't intimidating, but the proximity to that level of intensity was enough to make my palms subtly damp. He reached out, not toward me, but toward the strap of my crossbody bag. He gently adjusted it, shifting it higher on my shoulder. His fingers brushed the silk of my blazer sleeve, a fleeting, almost electric contact. "You look prepared," he murmured. "You always look prepared, Anya. I admire that about you." My face felt warm. This was the man who was my best friend's father, my client, the towering figure of New York finance. He was noticing my bag strap. This wasn't appropriate. This was unsettling. "It's just organization," I managed, sounding breathy even to my own ears. I wanted to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. He retracted his hand, but the intensity of the moment didn't recede. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He simply stood there, absorbing the atmosphere. "When you came into the boardroom yesterday," he started, his voice dropping slightly, "you saved me from a very public, very expensive failure. Most people would have waited, let the mistake play out, and then offered the solution to look good. You didn't. You saw the problem, you moved, and you fixed it instantly. You minimized the damage." "It was just a decimal," I repeated, feeling the need to shrink the significance of my action, and by extension, my interaction with him. "No, it was a clear, unselfish act of protection," he corrected me, his eyes unwavering. "I've spent 30 years surrounded by people who are waiting for me to fall. And you, Anya, Stella's quiet, meticulous friend, you stepped in without a second thought." I swallowed hard. Was he hitting on me? No. That was an absurd, narcissistic thought. He was Elias Bennett. He could date supermodels. He was just expressing intense, perhaps slightly overwhelming gratitude. I must be interpreting this wrong. It was late, he was tired, and I was reading too much into a moment of exhausted sincerity. "I'm an analyst, Elias. I see patterns and errors. That's my job," I insisted, trying to rebuild the professional wall between us. He smiled again, this time a genuine, sad curve of his lips. "It's more than a job, Anya. It's character. And frankly, character is the rarest commodity in this city. He picked up the briefcase and held it out to me. Be safe, and when you get back, don't rush off. I want to make sure you're properly caffeinated for the return drive. The simple request to stay for coffee felt disproportionately loaded. I took the briefcase, the cold metal a welcome anchor to reality. I had to leave. Now. Before I started imagining things that absolutely could not, and would not, happen. The drive to JFK was a blur of highway lights and nervous energy. The driver, a kind, silent man named Robert, was a professional in the truest sense. He didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk. He just drove. I completed the exchange with Mr. Kessel, a man equally harried and exhausted, at the private hangar, received the signed documents, and was back on the road heading toward Manhattan within the hour. When I arrived back at the penthouse, the hour was nearing midnight. I expected Elias to be gone, perhaps asleep, or simply waiting for the briefcase by the door. But when Robert dropped me off, the lights were still on. Elias was sitting in the massive living room, which felt less overwhelming now that he was occupying it. He wasn't working. He was simply staring out at the city lights, the remote control resting loosely in his hand. The silence was profound. He stood up when I entered. I walked straight to him, presenting the briefcase. Signed and sealed, Elias. No issues. He took the case, but instead of rushing it to a safe, he set it gently on the glass coffee table, minimizing its importance. His focus was entirely on me. Sit down, Anya, he requested, waving toward the enormous leather sofa. I sat cautiously on the edge, the briefcase still lying between us, a silent monument to the professional necessity that had brought me there. You must be tired, I said, unable to bear the quiet. He nodded slowly. Beyond that. I'm tired of the noise, the constant expectation. Stella thinks I live this perfect, powerful life. She sees the deals, the jets, the penthouse. He paused, looking down at his hands, which were strong and well kept, but seemed to tremble faintly. She doesn't see the cost. She doesn't see the silence when everyone leaves. This was the first time I had ever heard him speak with such raw exposure. It wasn't about business strategy or market acquisitions. It was personal, achingly so. My wife, Catherine. She lost her life 5 years ago, he said, the words heavy and deliberate. The silence started then. This apartment is too big. This life is too big. But I don't know how to scale it back without feeling like I'm failing her memory, or failing Stella. The image of the stoic, invincible CEO shattered in that moment. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was a grieving widower, a lonely father clinging to a routine that kept him functioning. He was trapped by the very empire he had built. I understand, I whispered, the words true and immediate. I knew loneliness. My own loneliness was quiet, woven into the fabric of my routine. His was loud, echoing off the marble walls of his 55th floor sanctuary. He looked up, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. Do you, Anya? I look at you, and you seem so centered, so capable of handling everything quietly. Quiet doesn't mean peaceful, I admitted, looking at the city lights mirroring the stars I couldn't see from my own window. It just means you're not making a fuss about the effort it takes to keep things together. The air between us shifted from professional transaction to shared vulnerability. He didn't see the invisible analyst anymore. He saw a person who understood the effort required to maintain a facade of competence, an emotional burden he had carried alone for years. The power dynamic hadn't inverted financially, but emotionally, we were suddenly standing on level ground. He went to the kitchen and came back with 2 simple ceramic mugs. One was the chipped one I'd noticed earlier. He placed the warm mug of herbal tea, not coffee as promised, but something calming, into my hands. The heat was grounding. This is ridiculous, he said, settling back onto the sofa. the distance between us now less formal, more shared. Here I am, unloading 5 years of emotional repression onto my daughter's brilliant young finance friend. He shook his head, a wry, exhausted gesture. I think you just needed to speak honestly to someone who isn't trying to sell you something, Elias, I replied, taking a careful sip of the hot tea. It tasted faintly of chamomile and mint. He smiled again, this time a slow, genuine lift of his tired features. Maybe that's it. You don't filter. You didn't filter that decimal point, and you're not filtering now. We talked for the next hour, and the conversation was astonishingly easy. It wasn't about the markets or his late wife. It was about small things. He asked about my nonfiction books. I confessed my obsession with historical economic disasters. He talked about trying to learn the piano again, and how frustrating it was to feel incompetent at something. We shared a quiet, contained laughter when he admitted he once tried to bake bread and nearly set off the fire alarms. The air thrummed not with sexual tension, but with intellectual and emotional recognition. I wasn't admiring the CEO. I was simply connecting with a man who was deeply flawed and intensely intelligent. He wasn't seeing the quiet analyst. He was seeing someone who understood the architecture of effort. At one point, he picked up the small chipped mug, turning it in his hands. Stella gave me this for Father's Day when she was 7. She painted "World's Best Dad" on it. She was always trying to patch the chips with glitter glue. The detail was incredibly moving. It was a tangible link to his past, a past that included the reason I was here. Stella. I felt a sudden, profound awareness of the physical space between us. The subtle angle of his knee facing me, the way his profile was illuminated by the city lights. It was late. The world was sleeping, and we were awake, sharing secrets in this silent, towering fortress. I should go, Elias, I finally said, setting my mug down. The comfortable silence had to end. The real world had boundaries we were dangerously close to forgetting. He didn't argue. He stood up with a measured slowness. Of course. Thank you, Anya. Truly. He extended his hand, but not for a handshake. His gesture was open, a quiet offering. I hesitated for only a second before placing my hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, encompassing mine completely. It was just a handhold, a gesture of shared respect and fleeting intimacy. Yet, the small, quiet moment resonated through me like a tuning fork. It wasn't a promise. It was just proof that for an hour, I hadn't been invisible. The elevator descended, carrying me away from the 55th floor, and the man who had just shown me the soft underbelly of his formidable life. My hand still tingled faintly where his had touched mine. Back on the street, the cold air was a shock, a harsh reality check. What was I doing? I walked the few short blocks to my apartment, a frantic internal monologue playing on repeat. He is Elias Bennett. He is Stella's father. He is my client's CEO. The implications of that hour were massive. Stella, my best friend. She saw me as family, a fixed point in her chaotic life. If she ever knew the intensity of the connection I'd felt tonight, that shared, exposed moment of understanding with her father, it would destroy our friendship. Stella idolized him, and I was stepping onto sacred ground. I went into my kitchen, avoiding the lentil soup I'd abandoned hours earlier. I should shut it down, immediately. Elias was exhausted and lonely. I was available and empathetic. That was the simple, dangerous equation. I needed to reestablish the professional distance, the protective barrier I'd spent years cultivating. I sat at my desk and pulled up my work email. I started drafting a message. Subject: follow-up on JFK delivery. Elias, thank you for trusting me with the documents. Regarding the payment for the late-night service, please send the funds to my company account, as agreed. Dry, formal, unbreakable. But as my fingers hovered over the keyboard, a memory intervened, the sincere exhaustion in his gray eyes, the weight of the chipped mug in his large hands. He hadn't asked for anything improper. He had simply asked to be seen, and I had, unintentionally, obliged. If I sent that email, I was actively rejecting the human connection we'd forged. I was cementing myself back into the role of the invisible analyst, cutting the lifeline I had just offered him. And more terrifyingly, I was rejecting the only moment in recent memory where I hadn't felt entirely alone myself. The desire to recede, to choose safety, was overwhelming. My life was safe, small, and predictable. Stepping toward Elias Bennett felt like walking toward a cliff edge. It wasn't just his reputation, it was mine. It was the potential loss of Stella, the loss of my professional anonymity, the loss of control over my carefully managed emotional landscape. I deleted the draft email. I couldn't reject him so coldly, not after the vulnerability he'd shown. I had to wait, let the intensity cool, and hope he returned to his normal, formidable self by morning. I feared that if I gave this feeling any space to breathe, I would lose everything I'd worked to maintain, including the precious, fragile peace of mind I currently possessed. My heart ached with the weight of the silent choice, safety or authenticity, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I wanted the authenticity, no matter the cost. I didn't sleep much. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The brush of his fingers on my blazer, the shared silence, the vulnerability in his voice when he mentioned his late wife. I kept telling myself it was a one-off, a late-night anomaly caused by stress and proximity. The next morning, Saturday, the phone rang exactly at 9:00 a.m., his number. I braced myself for the expected formal apology, the corporate reset button. "Anya," he said, the exhaustion gone, replaced by the familiar low assertiveness. "I hope I didn't wake you." "No, Elias, I've been up," I lied. "Good. I know you're busy, but I need a quick favor. I have 2 tickets to the New York Philharmonic tonight. I was supposed to take a client, but he canceled last minute. I hate to waste them." This was standard corporate theater. Offering a favor, testing the waters of obligation. "That's very kind, Elias, but I'm afraid I have plans." I manufactured smoothly. The plan was washing my hair and rereading a budget proposal, but the rejection felt necessary. The line went silent. It was a long, heavy pause, unlike the efficient silences he usually commanded. "No, you don't," he finally stated, his voice incredibly soft, cutting through my defense entirely. My breath hitched. "Excuse me?" "You don't have plans, Anya. You have routine. You have predictable solitude. I know this because I know Stella. I know you," he continued, his tone not accusatory, but devastatingly direct. "I have watched you in the periphery for years. I've seen how you sit in a meeting, how you wait for your turn, how you only speak when you have the undeniable, cold, hard truth to deliver. You are the only person in this city who doesn't seem to be performing." My heart started pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. He didn't just see the decimal point. He saw the whole equation of my life. "I'm not inviting you as an analyst, Anya. I'm not asking you as Stella's father. I'm asking as a man who, for the first time in 5 years, felt a complete, uncomplicated sense of peace last night. And that peace came from you. It came from being around someone whose motives are crystalline." I couldn't speak. My throat felt thick with emotion I hadn't prepared for. He took a slow, deep breath. Then came the words, simple and emotionally precise, the undeniable climax of everything that had passed between us. "I need you to stop making yourself invisible, Anya. I see you. I really see you. And I want you to be here tonight, beside me, where you belong." It wasn't a proposition. It was recognition. It was a demand for my presence rooted in an acknowledgement of my entire unseen self, and it was the most devastatingly honest thing any man had ever said to me. The world, for the first time, felt completely, terrifyingly in focus. My hands were shaking, not with cold or fear, but with the sheer force of being seen. My life's philosophy had always been to minimize risk, to ensure all variables were controlled. Elias had just tossed a grenade into my carefully constructed equilibrium. "Elias," I managed, my voice a ragged whisper. "You know who I am. You know my connection to Stella. This isn't possible." "All things are possible, Anya. You just have to choose which calculation you prioritize," he responded, his tone retaining that dangerous, soft conviction. "Is it the calculation of societal expectation, or the calculation of genuine human connection? Don't tell me you calculate for other people's comfort." His challenge was perfect. He knew my weakness. I valued truth and authenticity above all else. And the truth was, I hadn't felt this alive, this present, in years. I had been hiding, making myself safe. But safety had become synonymous with emotional starvation. "I'm terrified," I confessed, the admission spilling out, stripped of all professionalism. "I am terrified of what this means, of the potential fallout, of what Stella would think." "I am terrified too," he countered immediately. "I'm terrified of losing the small sliver of peace I found last night. I know the risks, but I've spent my whole life making high-stakes decisions, and I know unequivocally that this is a risk I want to take." I closed my eyes, picturing his face, not the CEO mask, but the man holding the chipped mug. He wasn't demanding anything. He was offering a shared space outside of the roles we played. "I don't know what the rules are," I said, opening my eyes. "There are no rules," he replied. "Just two adults who are deeply tired of pretense." I took a deep, steadying breath, finally silencing the internal debate. The fear hadn't vanished, but the desire to not feel invisible anymore was stronger. "Yes," I said, the words small but resolute. "I will come to the Philharmonic." A profound silence followed my answer. A silence filled not with awkwardness, but with the irreversible weight of a decision made. "Thank you, Anya," he said, and I heard the relief in his voice. Not the relief of a man who won a game, but the relief of a man who was finally understood. "I'll send Robert for you at 7. Wear whatever you feel comfortable in. Just be yourself." Be myself. That was the scariest proposition of all. I hung up the phone and walked to my closet, looking past the sensible blazers and functional dresses. Tonight, I wouldn't be the invisible analyst. I would be Anya. And I had no idea what that looked like. But I had decided, for the first time, to find out. Robert arrived precisely at 7, the quiet sedan waiting patiently at the curb. I was wearing a simple, dark green dress, a piece I usually reserve for weddings, something elegant but not ostentatious. My hands were still cold, the remnants of my earlier panic, but my decision felt solid. Elias was waiting in the car. He looked different again, dressed in a sharp, dark suit. But there was a palpable lightness in his expression, an anticipation I hadn't seen before. "You look beautiful, Anya," he said immediately, his eyes moving slowly over me, a respectful and deeply appreciative glance. "Thank you, Elias," I replied, managing a small, genuine smile. The drive to Lincoln Center was quiet, but not awkward. It was a comfortable silence, a continuation of the peace we'd shared the night before. Robert navigated the city traffic, and Elias didn't check his phone once. He simply watched the lights of the city pass, occasionally glancing at me. At the Philharmonic, we walked side by side. The grand columned entrance was overwhelming, but Elias's presence, The quiet warmth of his arm occasionally brushing mine grounded me. He didn't introduce me to anyone, didn't use me as corporate arm candy. He just held my elbow lightly as we found our seats. During the concert, the music swelled and subsided, a beautiful, dramatic soundscape. I felt Elias's attention shift from the stage to me at several points. Once, during a soft, melancholic passage, his hand slipped into mine. It was a quiet, non-verbal affirmation of our shared secret, a small, illicit comfort in the dark, crowded hall. After the performance, instead of heading to a high-profile dinner, Elias suggested we walk. We strolled through the crisp New York night, heading into Central Park, the sounds of the city muffled by the trees. "I haven't done this in years," he confessed, breathing deeply of the night air. "Just walk without an agenda." "It's freeing," I agreed. We talked about the music, about the subtle way the cello section handled the third movement. It was normal, easy, deeply connected. He wasn't the CEO. He was just Elias, a thoughtful, complex man who was beginning to let himself feel again. As we reached the edge of the park, Elias stopped, turning to face me completely under the soft glow of a street lamp. "We have so many layers to navigate, Anya. Stella, my position, your career," he said, his expression serious. "But I need you to know that the part of me that sees you is the most important part of me right now." I didn't pretend to have the answer or the control. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like, Elias," I admitted, wrapping my arms around myself. "But I don't regret tonight." He stepped closer, closing the final, remaining gap between us. He didn't rush. He simply looked at me, his gray eyes deep and sincere. The touch that followed was feather-light, a slow, gentle kiss that spoke volumes of respect, vulnerability, and undeniable, terrifying promise. It was the softest beginning imaginable to what felt like the biggest risk of my life. We stood there for a long moment, the world of work, status, and best friends momentarily silent around us. This was not the end of a story. It was the start of a complicated, exhilarating chapter. If you loved seeing how the quietest truth can break the strongest boundaries, and you want to know what happened when Elias and Anya had to face Stella, the ultimate complication in their power romance, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below with a red heart emoji if you think Anya should keep risking everything for this impossible connection.